I normally don't like being on any sort of hype train, since they often leave you feeling disappointed once the fun of the hype is over, and I've remained reasonable for the most part ever since my last hype train in 2017, but Tales is sort of a special exception, since it's a severely underloved series that I fell head over heels for fairly recently, and it's been a little over 4.5 years since the last one that wasn't a mobile game of some sort. I very nearly never got into the series, but I'm thankful I did. The silence has certainly been infuriating with this game. It got nothing between the E3 trailer from 2019 until the middle of June 2020, when we got a fake release date from GameStop, and then the news of the delay later that month. After that, it kind of fell off the radar for the whole world thanks to COVID, with nothing but statements about how the development is going smoothly. Thankfully, the days of silence and non-answers are over for now. I was on vacation when these were released, but my friend kept me up to date on the reveal of the release date and her raw thoughts on what they had to show. We both got a lot to say as Tales fans, so let's not waste any more time on the introduction and do the one thing the internet loves the most and talk about the things we don't like or are disappointed by in these reveals. Now, my friend is more infuriated about this than I am, admittedly, but that doesn't mean I'm not disappointed about this either. We both pondered about why the female main character looks so similar to Lila from Zestiria ever since the E3 trailer, and thus far the only answer we have is that the designers got lazy. That's putting things crass, but when have I ever been one for civil discussion? Let's put this into perspective here. Tales had one game release per year for a set of 2 to 3 years, with 1 year in between as a break. It's been that way since Tales of Destiny in 2002, after Xillia 2. They took a 2-year break before releasing Zestiria and Berseria back to back. After that, the mainline series was untouched for nearly 5 years. You'd think, given the differences between character design and Graces, Xillia 1 and 2, Zestria, and especially in Berseria, you'd be hard-pressed to find too many designs that looked like carbon copies of one another. Maybe in some of the NPCs or the guards, or in Zestiria and Berseria's case, world enemies and areas would be repeated for the sake of time constraints, and the fact that they're the same setting. Yet here with Arise, there's been years between releases, not much on the Tales team's plate as far as I've seen, aside from some mobile games. You'd think the designers could have done something other than just tweak the shadings on Lila's design. You can be pedantic and point out all the differences between Lila and Shionne's designs, but at the end of the day, if it weren't for Arise's different graphics and more detailed art style, you'd have a hard time telling them apart. It comes off as exceedingly lazy. The only defense I can even muster up is that Xionne at least has some reason to dress in a gaudy red and white dress like that, and that's the story, and her place as the secondary protagonist hailing from a royal position she wishes she could escape. I'm still very interested in how they'll handle all this in the game, but I can't use that to justify the reuse of Lila's design almost to a T. I get it, red is the color of royalty, and the design itself is far from ugly, but couldn't you have done something to another aspect of her design, maybe? Maybe change the white part of the lower half to be a colder color to clash with the light reds and white? Maybe take some of the bronze armor pieces on her shoulders and add it to her hips? Hell, just change the hairstyle from this ponytail look and I'm cool with the rest being similar. If the designers were really proud of the Lila design and really wanted to add her into the art style of Arise, then by all means, make her the cameo for this game. I'm down for that, even though I'd like it more if Berseria could get its cameo before any of the planks of wood in Zestiria's main cast. But as it is, if Lila is the cameo for Arise, and at this point I honestly wouldn't be surprised if she is so that they can put her and Xionne next to each other, then all I ask is that there's at least some Day 1 DLC outfits for the main cast, because the laziness is just unacceptable in my book. But the laziness isn't exclusive to Xionne. No, see if you can tell me where the inspiration for this particular move of Rinwell's came from.
I call him Elemental Mastery!
Now something like this is somewhat more irritating to me. Sharing the names and or looks of regular arts is fine. Hell, Xionne has this one move that once I heard it I couldn't help but think back to my spamming of Searing Edge. But something like this is clearly some kind of special art to her, or at the very least a chain art with Alphen. Yet those color effects behind her are just an updated version of Mila's mystic arts, and it's painfully obvious. I admit I don't know if they released any details on Rinwell or any other side characters for this game, but if they have, I doubt they're going for the same themes as the Seraphim and Zestiria, correlating with a different elemental effect that Sorey can use in Aromatization. It wouldn't make sense for Rinwell to have control over the 4 elements if that's the case. So I guess I shot my own speculation in the foot there. Whatever the case is, I don't like the reuse of these assets. Xillia is one of the games I want to play the least in the series, right next to Legendia and Hearts of R. So seeing Mila's assets carry on without Mila is kinda frustrating. Depending on what the theme for Rinwell is, you could do different colors for these big-ass glyphs at the very least. And keep the elemental theme if you absolutely must. Instead of yellow, green, and blue that we see here, and hopefully there is no red to help differentiate her from Mila in this regard, you could go with deep purple, and orange, and a mixture of yellow and green for her 3 glyphs. Am I nitpicking here? Possibly, but for now I see no excuse for the reuse of assets from older games when this game has had 5 years to settle on its aesthetics. Yet there's so much that's practically ported from the older games that it feels less like this game will be an evolution for the series and more like a Tales of Best Hits compilation of fan service. Which, hey, for their 25th anniversary, I would like, but I'd like it separate from the new entry that Arise is marketed as. Hint hint, Bamco. Could you please port the PS3 titles to PC? Please, at the very least, those games. And there's one thing about this game that I already fucking despise. It's something I hated about Code Vein, about Zestiria, and about any other game that's pulled this shit. Pre-order exclusive content. Now, I'm a relatively casual player with any game, but seeing this notice with some of the additional content that I see on the cover or on the store page kinda infuriates me. I've only ever pre-ordered 2 games in my life, and I regretted both instances. So seeing that developers and publishers are still willing to put that in my face and they're locking exclusive bits of content behind the purchase built on nothing but hope that the trailer is one-to-one reflective of the game on release makes me never want to buy the game, period. It may be cosmetic items in most cases, but it's cosmetics I can never obtain unless I open my wallet within a certain amount of time. Seeing the advertised look of Xion on this promo, and how it fixes the issue I have with her base design, kinda infuriates me even more. I can do nothing but hope there's a way to obtain these cosmetics in-game or through some separate DLC, but seeing how Bamco and Shift handled the DLC with Code Vein, and how neither the White Mia skin or the God Eater weapons pack are obtainable post-release date, I don't have high hopes. Nor do I have any delusions that just because I've voiced this, they'll make a last-minute decision to make these costumes and recipes obtainable in-game through some grinding. Is this a me problem? Not exactly, since it's content on the game being purposefully held hostage until someone pre-orders the game, and therefore it affects all the players who don't pre-order the game. And I'm not falling for that one no matter how excited I am for Arise. I'll buy it day one without a doubt, but I'm not putting down $1 until I see how stable the game is. I trust Bamco to not release a buggy, broken, oversized computer virus more than I'd trust a company like EA or Bethesda, but I'm still not opening my wallet until the release date so that Bamco never gets complacent with my money. I may just be one dude buying their games like a loyal customer, but I'm not selling my standards no matter how much I like them. Specifically because I don't want them to become just as greedy and unethical as the rest of the business. But I realize not everyone is as tight on their wallets, hence why pre-order culture exists in the gaming industry, and why games have gotten worse over the years. There are a few other disappointing aspects that I'm not a fan of, mainly Rinwell's hairstyle and the outfit aren't going to draw eyes to her. The other guy, whose name escapes me as I write this, has the same issue as Rinwell's costume in that they both lack a good color scheme that helps them stand out, mostly black with small uses of other colors, and revealing on one side, but nothing spectacular. Also, the removal of victory screens after battles is a massive letdown. That was an excellent additional piece of personality for the characters, as well as a good way of motivating you to do better in the next battles. Quips and one-liners from the characters and seeing the stats for a second while being able to explore around may have the same basic effect, but it's just not the same satisfying conclusion to battles they used to be. All that and the music in the demos didn't grab me by the balls the way Matoya Sakuraba, I hope I said that right, effortlessly did in Berseria. But it is still just a demo, so he could be saving his best cards for release. I sure hope so. That's all I specifically have to say as a complaint, but we're still going off the trailers in a collective 8 minutes worth of gameplay out of the typical 30 to 40 hours Tales games take to play, so we're not even getting the tip of the iceberg as much as we're being given a single ice cube. I imagine that's the way things will be released between now and September 9th when the game finally releases. I'll definitely be making a video and I'll not hold back on any negatives on release, but do know that I'm still fairly new as a Tales fan. Perhaps a more seasoned fan has more input on the things they hope are improved in these final months. Now, in the past year and 9 months I've been looking forward to this game, I've had just one gripe that's infuriated me more than the silence when this game had no release date set. Just one thing that kept me from fully giving in to my excitement for the game. The lack of actual gameplay footage is never a good sign, but is something most gamers have grown accustomed to in the AAA scene. Because who cares if you get duped into buying something way slower and way less exciting than the trailers led it on to be? The Arise trailers at E3 and from this year were far from bad, but they were still just that, trailers. Even with the bits of gameplay that have been released, I anticipate some concessions to be made, either to the graphics or effects on the art specifically. Otherwise, the game wouldn't have another 4 months in development, and we'd be seeing the honestly gorgeous canyons and snowy woods right now, and I wouldn't be yammering in this video. But until that day of sobering reality comes, allow me to gush over the open feeling the demos have shown. Is it the new standard for open-world RPGs? No. We don't even know if the openness of this canyon area is indicative of the rest of the game yet. It could be like the field system of the late PS3 titles, where they have these vast areas full of enemy encounters and items to hunt for that lead toward the more cramped town and dungeon areas. But even if this is just how the field systems are, it's a day and night improvement over Berseria. I love it to death, but there's no getting around how Berseria's simple programming means you'll deal with invisible walls over every slight edge in the game, meaning you'll have to go down the hills the way you came up them instead of having the ability to fall and carve your own path. Arise could still implement that, but based off what's been shown, there's more interactivity between the player and the world now. Swimming looks great, same with the many new things to interact with, such as healing NPCs with Shionne's healing powers, or the healing lights that restore HP without needing to spend a gel or meal. Realistically, I don't expect these details to improve or be game changers to the Tales format. The swimming looks like it'll just be another method of traveling between two separated pieces of land, kinda like how skipping across the rocks was in Berseria. So I don't see them making underwater physics, challenges, or even a diving minigame. In interacting with the NPCs, I imagine will offer some materials or a boost to a certain stat other than HP. Again, mostly just fun little additions to the gameplay that'll go unnoticed by everyone except those who take their time to explore every bit of the game. Nothing outstanding, but nothing worth complaining about either. Nevertheless, the new feeling of openness the levels have is a welcome addition, and one I look forward to exploring to the limits with. I jokingly refer to this open field system as something that'd be right home in a Witcher game, and I hope in some light it is like that on release date. The combat looks absolutely orgasmic. I was worried they ditched the fast pace and thrill of Berseria's speedy, free-roaming combat in favor of something more experimental, like when Zestiria thought restricting players to moving back and forth only was a good idea. No, Arise looks just as intense as the trailers made it look, and if they make some tweaks to Rinwell's art colors and anything else that feels like they're dipping too deep into the fan service, then just like with Berseria, I'm gonna fight every beast on screen purely for the fun of the combat loop. It looks that damn good. I just hope there's more to the party than the 4 that's shown thus far, because the variety of the 6 characters in Zestiria and Berseria were what extended the life of the game. And while the variety of Alphen's 2 swords, Rinwell's Book of Magic, Shionne's rifle, and the 4th guy's kung fu kicking is a nice and healthy variety, there could be a bit more. But perhaps they're only writing this with 4 characters in mind for the story. I don't know why, but it's a possibility and one I hope isn't the case. That's all I really got on Tales of Arise for right now. As stated, I'm still excited to play the game, but reasonably excited. Me and my friend have hyped up the game for almost 2 years and are already concerned more than when we had no information at all. Nevertheless, we're both still going to play the living shit out of it, bond over our love for Tales, and be honest when the game comes out if it turns out to be a big piece of shit, or an utterly fantastic game with a few aesthetic hiccups. For the next 4 months, all we can really do is wait and see what else comes out about it. I didn't feel like commenting on the graphics and art style all that much, since the game is still in active development, and the 8 minutes of gameplay are taken from wildly different moments in the story. So they can become better, or more likely become uglier. Nobody but the developers know for now. The only slightly related note I have to say is that I'm loving the transparent UI with the shop menu and the equipment screen, and how smooth that looks, as they should. Shame that nowadays having good UI is something worth praising about games, but with so many examples of fucked up UI, I have to give credit where it's due. They also have yet to show any dungeons as far as we could tell, so how well it'll be is anyone's guess. And the lack of any info on them is somewhat concerning. Just don't repeat the maze that is Berseria's final dungeon, or the water temple in Zestiria, and we're good. I also noticed there's no sign of this game ever coming to the Epic Store. Ha! Get fucked, Tim Sweeney! Bamco knows Gaben is the best sugar daddy!